Thank you. Terrific to see Bill and Tanya both joining here at the Caucus this morning. I'm firstly, however, going to invite Linda Burney to the podium to do an acknowledgement of country. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, and good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many people here. Balam Ambul, Nanawal Nambi. I've been invited to provide an acknowledgement of country this morning. I'm very honoured to do so at this important gathering of the Women's Budget Statement 2017 for Labor. I am a very proud Wiradjuri woman amongst a multitude of astounding women in the Shorten Labor Caucus. To a group of women like this, I do not need to underscore the importance of showing respect, the importance of good manners, and the importance of observing protocol. Acknowledgement of country for us is an absolute part of the essence of who we are as Labor. Women, all of you, in all of our cultures, are the givers of life, the keepers of stories, and the creators of narratives. Women hold communities together, and often, particularly in my communities, provide a safe haven for many. At the 1997 Reconciliation Convention, of which Senator Patrick Dodson was the chairperson, one of the most powerful statements came from Helen Dean, who was the wife of the then Governor-General, Sir William Dean. And she said this, she said, "What I want as a woman, as a mother, is the same as what everyone wants, particularly Aboriginal women. We want a safe place, we want a prosperous community, and we want our children to thrive and have the same opportunities as everyone else." And I know a room like this, I know our leadership team from the Labor Party wants the same things. So thank you very much and welcome to this very important morning tea.
Thank you, Linda, for that incredibly generous acknowledgement to country. Look, it gives me great delight to be here this morning. I do want to pay a tribute to all of the men and women in this room because so many of you have been major contributors over many, many years, some of you decades, to achieving gender equality in Australia. And we walk on your shoulders. There are a tremendous depth of experience and expertise in this room, and I just wanted to acknowledge that up front. Whether you are a policy maker working in frontline services or a contributor in any way to public life, you play a critical role in helping us achieve gender equality in Australia. This is the production of a women's budget statement remains really central to Labor's commitment. Many of you will remember that this was a long-standing tradition in Australia, indeed since 1983, and it was for 30 years. Regretfully, that stopped with the election of Tony Abbott's government, and Malcolm Turnbull has failed to live up to, the promise of achieving of producing a budget statement as well. So it's something that is really central to Labor's core beliefs of achieving gender equality in Australia. And so we do this from opposition. There are a lot of people who spend a lot of intense hours over the last 2 days pulling this document together, and I know that Emma will give some thanks to those people towards the end, but I wanted to acknowledge that up front. And it is critical that we continue to do this from opposition. It's unfortunate we don't have a government who really gives a damn about producing this document, but we know the importance of having an annual women's budget statement and being able to hold these guys to account for the differential impacts of the way that we collect monies and distribute monies in Australia and what that means for quality of life for women. But in addition to that, this year, and I really pay tribute to Bill and Tanya for the launch of a really important major national conversation that we're about to embark on now called Setting the Agenda, which will really look at it will provide a blueprint for us, for Labor, in terms of our policies going forward for gender equality in Australia. We know many of the issues that are confronting us in terms of trying to achieve that equality, but we're really looking now to provide those solutions, and we want you to be very much part of that conversation. So we've established a website. Just jump onto www.settingtheagenda.com.au. There's a terrific survey on there that you can complete. But we are really interested in meeting with women and indeed everybody interested in gender equality right across Australia. So please, if you want to take part in those conversations, see myself or get in touch with Tanya's office, and we'll make sure that you're part of that important policy making process going forward. But thank you for being here today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our Deputy Leader and Shadow Minister for Education, soon to be Minister One Host, and Shadow Minister for Women. We couldn't want for a greater advocate for Australian women than we have in Tanya Plibersek. So please, Tanya, come and
Sharon for that very warm introduction. Sharon, of course, with Emma Hassar, heads up our Caucus Status of Women Committee, and they do a fantastic job examining legislation, campaigning on women's issues. It's wonderful to have their support for this terrific function today. I also want to thank Linda Burney for her acknowledgement of country. All of us pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today. It's wonderful to have Linda to do our acknowledgement of country today. Budgets matter, and budgets matter for women. The decisions that governments make about how to raise money and how to spend that money have profound influences on the lives of all Australian men and women. But the influences they have on men's lives and women's lives are different. Budgets are not gender neutral. And the reason that we have produced this budget statement this year, the reason we've done it for the last 4 years, is because we believe that looking in detail at the way that these measures affect men and women differently is an important role in holding our government to account. But as well as that, it's an important discipline for us when we're in government again. We were always careful when we were in government to make sure that our policies contributed to gender equality, not detracted from them. And there are so many examples of that. Of course, it's in the big items like making sure we properly fund Medicare, like establishing the National Disability Insurance Scheme, a Labor scheme right to its very heart, because it's a scheme that makes sure that every Australian has the opportunity to achieve whatever they want in their lives. Fully funding it, making sure that it was giving parents and people with disabilities the certainty about what would happen for them in the future. From those huge programs like Medicare, National Disability Insurance Scheme, increasing the age pension, to the small things, the relatively small things that make such a difference in people's lives. Making sure that we have, for example, properly funded national women's alliances, so those women's voices can be heard effectively by government. Budgets matter, and this analysis, this gender analysis of the budget matters too, and it could not have happened without an enormous contribution from all of the shadow ministers and their officers and their staff. Can we give them a really big round of I've had to get across the whole budget since Tuesday night and think about the different impacts of the different measures for men and women to produce this statement. We had fantastic help from Emma Maiden from Unions New South Wales, who camped out in our office this week to help us write the budget, the women's budget statement. So a round of applause for Emma, please. There are people from right across the women's sector who have helped produce analysis very speedily over the last day and a half to contribute to this statement. So a huge thank you to all of those people from the women's sector who have done it. And of course our Status of Women Committee. You've met Sharon Clayton, you'll soon meet Emma Hassar. The work that they have done heading up the committee and the contribution they've made to this policy document is extraordinary. But we also need to help the people, to thank the people who did the hard work beavering away in the dark recesses of my office over the last few days. Of course, Lauren Power, who's on our staff, brought together this whole project and did it very quickly, very effectively, very efficiently. Rachel Durant, who's been up all night laying out the document, Alex West from my office, and Shelley Marr from Bill's office, who have all made enormous contributions. David McElray from my office proofread the document, and he would cry if I didn't mention his name in this long list. So we have to mention him as well. All of this has been done since Tuesday night, so thank you to everyone who's contributed, and to those who are going to read it with a critical eye. Remember, we are doing this with the resources of opposition and a lot of sleeplessness, so be generous to us. The final thing I want to do today is introduce our leader, Bill Shorten. It has been so fantastic working with Bill on these so many issues, but particularly on the issues that have such profound influences on people's lives. With Jenny Macklin, it was Bill who established the National Disability Insurance Scheme. He has been a fierce warrior to protect Medicare, to fight against the cuts in this budget with Catherine King. He has been a very strong advocate for victims of domestic violence and greater investment in the services that support victims of domestic violence. And as a unionist and as leader of the Labor Party, he has fought for fair pay and conditions for the working women of Australia, who we know are more dependent on awards, more dependent on the overtime pay that this Liberal government is trying to take away from them. It was Bill that said, I firmly believe that if this Parliament did nothing else in the next number of years but advance the march of women through the institutions of power, in workplaces, in unpaid work, in family law and economic equality, if we did nothing else in this country as a whole in the next 15 years but install women in a place of equal treatment in our society, we will be a richer, more prosperous country with a far better prospect of a bright future. I think that quote describes Bill in
Hi everyone, and good morning. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, and pay my respects to elders, both past and present. In fact, in that vein, I'd like to acknowledge two really, really remarkable Indigenous women who've joined our federal parliamentary ranks, Linda Burney and Maladuri McCarthy. And can I just say to you, and you know it already, you've just heard from us, but not only how lucky is the Labor Party, how lucky am I to have Tanya Plibersek as my deputy. I want to acknowledge Penny Wong, who's had to briefly go back to go after the government again and keep them honest. Well, she's trying. Penny Wong, our leader in the Senate, Sharon and Emma, who've done great work in terms of the Caucus Committee. I want to acknowledge, in fact, all of the parliamentarians of the Labor Party who are here. We don't always agree on everything in our federal parliamentary party, but I can tell you and reassure all of those who want to see Labor carry the message on behalf of millions of Australians, we're humming. We are determined, we're robust, we're resilient, and we are going to bring this government to book. And that's a job which every one of our federal parliamentarians is up for, so I want to acknowledge all of them. Now, once upon a time, back in 1983, and indeed every year thereafter to 2013, governments would bring down a women's budget statement. And you would have thought that when you win a battle, you move on. What you don't expect to do always is have to refight the same fights. It is appropriate that there is a budget statement analysing the impact of decisions of government upon Australian women. It is appropriate, it is sensible, it is logical. But then in 2014, or at the end of 2013, we got a new Minister for Women, Tony Abbott. A significant feminist. No, it's not. And sorry for all those who are correcting me in their head. I got a telepathic message. But the good news is that even though he cancelled it, and old Malcolm Turnbull, the former warrior, a progressive warrior of Q&A until he actually got his hands on the reins of power, he chose to copy Tony Abbott and not do this. The good news is, though, that Labor has picked up, even in opposition, the challenge of preparing a statement of the budget's impact on women. And this is the fourth one we've now produced, and Tanya has appropriately acknowledged all of the great people who've worked so hard on this. And imagine how we can analyse the budget when we win the election, when we next win the election, but it's a great piece of work which has been done. But what the work also reveals, though, is that we are going backwards in this country. And that's perhaps why more than ever this needs to be produced. Over the life of the Liberal government, Australia as a nation in the gender global rankings, we have fallen from 19th place to 46th place. If that was the Olympics, they'd call a Royal Commission. When it comes to equal treatment of women, they've decided in this budget to see if they can get our number even lower. This budget contains measures which materially are detrimental to the women of Australia. Keeping a range of the Medicare rebates frozen for 3 years. The rebates are payments made to patients. When they freeze a rebate and stop it from increasing, as they will do in the case of some medical procedures, up to 6 years, they're going to freeze it. That'll have been the effect of what they've done. This hurts women, it hurts patients, and it is the case that women are twice as likely to put off going to see the doctor because of cost. So when you make it harder for people to see the doctor, you don't cure the sick, you just make them sicker. And women disproportionately will bear the burden and will bear the burden of this government's hopeless attitude to Medicare. Then, of course, we got the surprise package. They're increasing the price of going to university, taking our economy and our society in exactly the opposite direction to where it needs to go. And they've lowered the threshold at which HECS payments become repayable, down to $42,000 approximately. 60% of the people who will be affected by the lower threshold are women. So in healthcare, women lose. In higher education, women lose. Pick another area, international aid. International aid is being cut. Programs which help women and children in our region do better and around the world. Mind you, they're giving international aid at unprecedented levels in tax cuts for multinationals. If they want to look at cutting foreign aid, cut some of those tax cuts, but don't affect women and children in developing nations. Yeah. And then, of course, there's penalty rates. On 1 July, a millionaire in this country has the prospect, if you earn $1 million, you have the prospect, courtesy of M. Turnbull, to get a reduction in your tax of $16,400. So under Malcolm Turnbull, millionaires pay less, but everyone else will pay more. But the particularly bitter irony of July 1, when the tax reductions, when the pay less offer comes in for millionaires and large companies, is that on July the 2nd, if you are a woman shop assistant, because working that Sunday, July the 2nd, it will now be legal. It will be the law, because when you have an award, it is the effect of the law. It will be legal to cut that woman's work, her wages for an 8-hour shift in retail by $77. So this country does not have better days ahead of it, as Mr. Turnbull and his failing treasurer would have us believe, better days, whatever. In fact, July 1, it's a better day for a millionaire. July 2, it's a worse day for working women in retail and hospitality. So when Malcolm Turnbull says that women hold up half the sky, they're not getting half the pay. The pay gap, 17% less. Penalty rate cuts. This is a government who doesn't know the true meaning of fair. Their research groups and polls have said you've got to use the word fair. It is the new adjective de jour for the preference of the Liberal Party of this country. The problem is no one's told them the meaning. It is not fair what they're doing to women in this country. And one way that we do make sure that women get a fair deal is we advance the case for women in positions of power in this country. One thing I learned as a union rep is that you could never get a fair deal for the workers if you weren't in the room. And I think that principle holds true in much of life. When there are women in the parliament, when there are women in the leadership, when there are women on the front bench, women get a better deal. There are some successes for Labor that the government started to wake up to. These are unaffectionately known as zombie measures. Labor has had some wins. After 4 years of campaigning, they paid parental leave. It's not a double dip anymore that you either have to get your workplace entitlement or you get the minimum federal entitlement. So we've won some arguments. Labor's been prosecuting the case that victims of family violence should not be cross-examined by unrepresented perpetrators because that is injury upon injury. But the point about this government, and I think the cat was let out of the bag by the finance minister on one of those boutique, one of the television shows late at night, he said he regretted that all the tough measures couldn't get through. So that is where they come from. The zombie measures of this government are merely asleep, but they haven't gone away. This government is a government who regrets that they can't inflict the 2014 budget, but if you regret it, that means you want to do it. And that is why more than ever, the Labor movement needs to focus on campaigning on this budget. More than ever, we need to have more women in Parliament. More than ever, we need to have women in positions of power. More than ever, we need to have the facts on the table. I want to congratulate Labor women, the staff, for keeping the faith when we're in opposition. And I promise you that there will come a time when we will release the Women's Budget Statement from the Government of Australia, and we will keep fighting every day until we can do that. Thank you very much.